Okay, good evening, everybody, and hello to all of you, wherever you are listening from this evening. Thank you very much for deciding to listen. This is day 3 of the fantastic Sky Teach Marathon, teaching children how to learn, a very important topic. And I hope that you were listening yesterday to Gail's fantastic presentation and to the one yesterday and the one the day before as well. Very interesting stuff. Good evening, Yana. Good evening, everybody all the way across Russia. While I was waiting, I was looking at where you all come from. I see there's people from Ukraine, Romania, even from the US. That's really fantastic. So in day 3 of our marathon, the talk, what are we going to be looking at? My talk is encouraging a growth mindset in class and at home. And I'm going to talk very briefly about what the growth mindset is. And then I'm going to tell you some practical activities that you can carry out in the classroom and other things that can be done at home with your own children, or things that you can tell your parents, the parents of your students, and get them to help you along with the same thing. Don't forget, of course, that you should ask questions throughout this webinar. You can type them into the chat box, and at the end of the webinar, I will do my best to answer them. And the most interesting questions will get a prize from T-Tool. So get typing, get asking questions. Maybe you will get a prize. Also, at the very end of everything, after the questions, our partners, ABC Carpet, will also have a prize, a creative competition. So, so looking forward to seeing your questions. Okay, so to begin with, I'd like to know how many of you are teachers and how many of you are parents. So perhaps you could type into the chat box there, T if you're a teacher, and P if you are a parent who's interested in English, who's interested in teaching their children English, and maybe TP if you are both of them. Thank you, Yana, for starting that off. Okay, so we've got T's and P's. P's. Excellent. Okay, we've got a mixture. Even if you're not a parent, as teachers, we of course have a lot of contact with our parents. So hopefully the second half of the presentation will also be something that you can pass on to the parents of your students. Now, another chance for you to put your hands up and get active in the chat box. I'd like to tell you about some students, and if you have a student like this in your classroom, or if you have ever had a student like this in your classroom, could you please type in the chat box a plus sign? I think that would be the best idea. So have you ever had a student in your classroom who hides his work from you like this when you're walking around the classroom? Have you ever had a student who used to be a top grade student, someone you were very proud of, and this year they've suddenly lost all interest in English, they've completely stopped studying? If you have that kind of student, give me a plus. Do you have a student who is very good at English, but they really like everybody to know that? They're the kind of student that says, oh, look at me, look at my test, what did you get? Yeah, I can see more pluses appearing for this too. Have you got a student who one day tries very hard, gets good results, and the next day is just not interested at all? And finally, have you got students in your class who just say, I don't know, or just shrug their shoulders when they're answering any question? A lot. Somebody wrote there, a lot. I feel sorry for you. So do I. So do I. Okay, so Whether that's good or bad, we have a lot of pluses in our chat box. So basically, what does that mean? If you answered yes to some of those questions, this means that you have students who have a fixed mindset. And what does that all mean? The lady that you can hopefully see on your slide now is Carol Dweck, and she's a sort of linguistic psychologist, and she was the lady who started talking about the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. What she was interested in finding out was why some students give up when they're faced with challenges, when other students are prepared to carry on working, and whether that was connected to their intelligence in some way or not. And so with all her studies, she discovered that there are basically two types of people. There's the type of student who believes that we are born good at one thing and not so good at another thing. So for example, I'm good at languages, but I'm really bad at biology. Somebody else is really good at physics, but they're not very good at, I don't know, art. And that this doesn't change, that these are the abilities that we are born with. That's called a fixed mindset. But if you have a growth mindset, it means that you see the brain as a muscle. And like any other muscle in our body, if we train it, if we practice it, we can grow. And this is the theory of the growth mindset. Now, what does that actually mean for our students? What does it mean for our classroom? If you look at the table, and just to say, we're just going to go through this briefly, but the materials, the useful materials that are provided at the end, you can find this table in there as well. So make sure you get hold of the materials, and then you'll be able to study this in a little bit more detail. Basically, children, and of course it's not only children, adults as well, if our students have a fixed mindset, what does that mean? Their goal in school is not to become better at English. They simply want to look smart in the eyes of the teacher, in the eyes of the other students, in the eyes of their parents maybe. But the actual learning is not so important to them. They're only focused on that grade or that percent or the result at the end of their tests. What that means is that if they find something difficult in the classroom, a challenge, they're likely to avoid them or even give up and drop out of class. They're not interested in working hard to get to their end goal. They're only interested in the end result. And in a worst case scenario, what that can mean is that students will even cheat because they will do anything they can to get that final goal. And the actual learning is not important at all. When it comes to the other people in the classroom, they are the kind of student who doesn't really pay attention when the teacher is giving feedback. You know, the kind of student that you're saying, well, you know, next time try to have a few more paragraphs or try to use more linking words. And really, they've just got this glazed look in their eyes and they're not paying attention at all. Why is that? It's because that piece of work for them is an individual piece of work. It's finished, it's gone, they forget about it, and they don't see how each piece of work leads to improvement in the next piece of work. And yes, is it Anna? Yeah, I absolutely was that kind of student myself. I totally admit it. Sometimes this kind of student isn't very nice to work with because firstly, they're ignoring the teacher, but secondly, they don't like the other students in their group. They feel threatened by students who are cleverer than they are because they always want to be top of the class, and they don't like anybody who's clever, who's potentially more clever than they are. And that means that they don't want to work in pairs, they don't want to work in groups, and they're all just basically a difficult kind of student to deal with. But if we can develop a growth mindset in our students, they are going to be less interested in getting that 100% on their test. I'm more interested in just learning English for the value of English, for the enjoyment, for the real life communicative goal that English can give them. So how can we combat the fixed mindset that many of our students have? Well, I think a lot of you will know that if we say something enough times, we begin to believe it. And it's the same thing in the classroom. So the words that we choose as a teacher, of course, I don't mean that you're saying to your students, oh, you're stupid, and your students are beginning to believe that. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But sometimes as teachers, when we give feedback to our students, when we are even we think we're praising them, we don't we don't choose our words very carefully. And although we have good intentions, we maybe have the result that we don't want. So I'd like to look at some comments now by teachers, and I'd like to see if we can change them into a more productive comment. So if we take this first comment, you see, I knew you could do it. It wasn't as hard as you thought, was it? I think this is a fairly standard comment. It could come from any one of us teachers. But what's wrong about it? Maybe someone would like to comment in the chat box about how this could be transformed into a more productive comment to help our students. On the one hand, it doesn't look like a terribly bad thing to say. But if we look at this example, do you remember how hard this was when you first started? Look how much progress you've made. How is that different from the first comment? I'll just go back to the first comment there. When here, what are we saying? It wasn't as hard as you thought. What are we doing? We're telling the students that, oh, you know, this work was easy and that you did well because it was easy. That's not really the case, is it? Whereas if we rephrase it more positively, we're focusing on the progress. We're not denying that the task was difficult. We're saying, yes, it was difficult, and you have managed it, and look at the progress. So instead of seeing a task as one complete thing, we're seeing it as a part of a progression. Let's look at another teacher comment. This is a comment that unfortunately I fall into this trap all the time. I say, oh, you're such a great group of kids. You guys pick this up so quickly. You guys are so smart. You're so wonderful. But this isn't a really good thing to say to our children. Would anyone like to suggest how we could rephrase this to make it a little bit more focusing on the learning and not so much focusing on the intelligence? Effective? Mm-hmm. Hardworking. Yes, I like that, Anastasia. Yeah, absolutely. Focusing on the effort that they put into it. Yes, I like the way you're learning. Yeah, absolutely. Here's a suggestion. Great, you learned that really well. What's our next challenge so you can grow? So just because our students have got the result that they wanted, that doesn't mean that it's the end of the line. We all know that there's no end to learning the English language, unfortunately. So what's the next challenge that can help us all to develop? And a third comment that I'd like to look at here is when you say to students, maybe when they're writing a test, don't worry, stop complaining. It's not as hard as you're making it out to be. Again, this is not necessarily the right thing to say in this context. Would anyone like to suggest something that would be better than saying stop complaining? Yeah, too many negatives for sure. Ah, yes. Yeah, exactly. Do you remember when we did something else, referring to the past, showing students how what they did before is related to the present moment? That's a very good suggestion because it really reinforces the idea of progression throughout the academic year or throughout your career learning English. I like that one. I think here, let's try together another nice suggestion. Yeah, yes, it is tough. It is difficult because everything is hard at first, and that's okay. We learn best by doing things that are a challenge in the beginning. There's no point in telling our students that something is easy when it isn't. If you tell your students all the time, this is easy, then when they face something that isn't easy, they don't have the strategies to cope with that. So we all know that at the beginning, everything is difficult. Everything is difficult until it becomes easy, as the famous quotation goes. So what can we actually do with our students? Because it's not only about our own words, of course. We need to change the words that our students are using to talk about their own attitude. And on this slide, you can see some classroom activities that you could try out. The first activity here that looks a bit like a notice board, it's got kind of post-it notes. This is a type of matching activity that you could do with your students. All the pieces of paper that are white here have a rather negative comment that students make. You can see, I give up, I don't understand, I'm not good at this. These are common comments. I'm sure that you hear this in the classroom. But on the colorful piece of paper, we've got a transformation. We've got a more positive comment that the students could be saying instead. Instead of saying, I don't understand, what am I missing? Asking students to look for the missing information, to look for another strategy, to ask a friend, to ask the teacher, to work out how to find the answer when something seems to be difficult to them. I made a mistake. Okay, never mind. Mistakes help me make progress. So an activity that you could do with these pieces of paper is you would prepare these, and again, on the useful materials that you can get after this webinar, you will see a worksheet which you can just cut it up, and then you can ask your students to match a negative comment with a positive comment, and then you could turn it into a colorful poster. You could put it on the wall of your classroom. Students could keep it perhaps inside their textbook if you do it small, and then they can always be reminded that mistakes are not a bad thing, and that difficulty is not a bad thing, that there's a more positive way of looking at our mistakes. Something else you can do to help the students, I'm sure, as many of you are Russian, so I'm sure you recognize the photograph on the slide. Would somebody like to type who this man is, just so I can check that I've got the right guy here? Who do you recognize? Oh, hooray, I chose the right guy. Yes, absolutely. So this is Lev Tolstoy. And why is he here? Not because he wrote the longest book in the history of the Russian language. Lev Tolstoy and William Churchill and Taylor Swift, the singer, and many, many other celebrities were told as children that they were useless, that they were not academic, that they would have no future. And it can be very interesting to discuss these people with your students and to show how these people who were so successful later in life, like many other people, they made mistakes in their childhood, and people thought that they wouldn't be good at things, but that other people's opinion of you doesn't matter. If you just keep on trying and keep on trying, you will reach your goal. So you can create your lesson plans around these famous people. Learning these things, of course, isn't something that happens overnight. One lesson with your students will not make them have a growth mindset. So some teachers I know like to cover the walls of their classroom with posters, with motivational comments, like the one that you can see here. Challenges make me stronger. And again, in the useful materials at the end, you can find lots of these posters. Well, there's about 6 of them, but you can find them on Google. There are so many of them out there. You can ask your students to color them in, decorate the classroom, and then it will always be on the wall of your classroom, and you can constantly refer to them when your students are being a bit negative or they're finding something difficult. Remind them, challenges help us grow. The final picture that you can see there is about making plans. Again, just to remind you, we want to focus on how learning is a progression. It's a process. And so making plans for the future is an interesting way to contrast what students were not able to do in the past, what they can and can't do now, what stage they're at in their learning, and where they want to be in the future. This is a poster that I did with some of my adult students making New Year's resolutions for 2019. So on this poster, basically, students should write what they are not able to do now and what they would like to be able to do and how they think they are going to get there. And you as a teacher can help them to create realistic goals. So we never stop learning. And then at the end of the academic year, or at the end of the course, students can look back on this and see, yes, this is the progress that I have made. Once upon a time, I couldn't do it, and now look, I can. That's what I did with my adult students. With children, you've probably heard about this wonderful, miraculous word in English. It's so small, only 3 letters, and yet it is so powerful. This word, yet. The first poster you can see here was created by a primary school teacher, an elementary school teacher in the USA. And she made this class poster, things we can't do yet. It's too small probably for you to see here, but each of these little comments is an activity that an elementary school child would like to be able to do. For example, to do a handstand, to do a cartwheel, something like that. And underneath each comment, there's an empty bracket. And for some of them, the teacher has actually written in her own name. And the idea is that students write up things that they can't do, and over a course, as they learn to do those things, they get to write their name onto the poster. And so students learn that, yeah, there was a time when I couldn't, and now I can. So I have made progress. So I'm continuing to learn. And of course, it increases their motivation, and it gives them a good feeling about themselves. On the same idea, just a slightly different structure, the poster, not yet, but I will. And this takes their goal and breaks it down into 4 different stages. I can't, but what I can do now, and what I will do to help me on my goal, and then in the future I will be able to do this thing. So breaking down their goals into manageable chunks. And in the photographs you can see one of the ways that I adapted this for my 9-year-old learners. We were learning the present perfect, which obviously fits very well with the word yet. And we made these posters of things that we haven't done yet, and we added, but I will. So we're showing that in the future we will definitely change, and that this is not the end point. You can see some of the things that the children wanted to do. I haven't eaten sushi yet, and some other crazy ideas that 9-year-old children like to think of. But that means that at a later stage, the children can look back on that and they say, yeah, once upon a time, I couldn't do that. It seemed difficult for me. It seemed impossible. But look, I've done it now, and I reached my goal. I was able to do it. There are lots of lovely books out there to read with your children. The first 2 on this list, The Girl Who Never Made Mistakes and Your Fantastic Elastic Brain, those 2 first books can be downloaded for free off Vocab. contact you. I don't know if I should be advertising that because it's not entirely legal, I suppose, but you can download those books for free. They are picture books, books with simple English, lots of beautiful pictures, and they are created especially to teach the children about having a growth mindset and a better attitude towards their own learning. For what ages are those books? They vary. They're made for native speakers around about the age 6 to 10, I suppose. And I used them with my 9-year-old students. Some of them, in terms of age, up to about age 12, I suppose, but it probably depends a little bit more on the level of English that they have. But you can adapt the books, because for some of the books you can just, if your students are good enough, if they are A2, they will be able to read those books together with you. For some of the books, the English is a little more difficult, but you can read them in your usual teacher style, reading it together, looking at the pictures, focusing more on the action in the picture and not so much on the actual words. But these are really wonderful books. And I'd like to share with you 2 lesson plans based on the first 2 books. Again, in the useful materials that you can get at the end, there is a lesson plan for each of the first 2, and I'll just show you some of the things that I was doing. Again, so this is the first book, The Girl Who Never Made Mistakes. This is a really, really beautiful book. You can see the beautiful illustrations, and it's the story of a girl called Beatrice who never made mistakes in anything that she did, but she had a very safe life until one day she's juggling and she makes a mistake, and you can see the picture there of a very unhappy, wet-looking girl with a hamster sitting on the top of her head. It's a very beautiful story. It's very funny, and the point is that after she makes this mistake, she learns that making mistakes can actually be fun and that she should take risks. And she goes out ice skating with her friends for the first time, and she falls and they laugh, and she gets up again, and she falls and they laugh and she gets up again, and it totally changes her life. And the last line of the story for me is very beautiful. It says, now they don't call her the girl who never made mistakes, they call her Beatrice. So the girl gets a real personality after she learns that life is a lot more fun when you take risks, even if you make mistakes. So with my 9-year-olds, who are around about A2, we read through this book together, page by page. We talked about the pictures, we imagined how she was feeling. And when we had finished the book, I asked the students if they thought that Beatrice was happier now that she made mistakes. And of course, the answer was yes. So then the students had to write their own story about a time when someone made a mistake, but the results of the mistake were positive. And you can see my students here writing their stories in pairs. And the story that I've highlighted, I put a circle around it, you can see that says mistakes are good, is what the girls have written. So they all came up with these beautiful situations of how they made a mistake, but they learned something from it, or they got something positive from it. And then of course we put them up around the classroom and we read everybody's stories and we talked about that. So that is something that you can do. I really, really recommend this book. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And the second book that you can find a lesson plan for in the useful materials is The Fantastic Elastic Brain. This one has English that's a little bit more challenging on some pages. So actually you can read together with your students the pages that they are capable of reading, and the other ones you can just deal with it by looking at the pictures. And it talks about, it specifically teaches students the idea that the brain is a muscle, the brain can be trained, and the brain can grow. And then they can make their own posters like the ones that you can see here. What have they learned What can their brain do? What do they hope their brain will help them to do in the future? And the book talks about how the brain doesn't only help you to do academic things, it helps you to do sport, it helps you to have relationships with other people. And all that is very important because, again, we don't want our students to feel that school is just about academic things, but we need to have a growth mindset in all aspects of life. And some of our children are going to go on to be sports players, so it's important for them as well. So you can find the lesson plans and some extra materials for that in the useful materials at the end of the webinar. So let's look then at some activities that we can do in the classroom. Why do we want our students to do these things? So down the first side, you can see we want our students to learn how to edit their own work. We want them to record teachers' feedback for the future. We might want to play winnerless games with them. So games where there's no there's no one winner. We want to prohibit negative language from the students. And we might want to gamify our lessons. Why might we want to do that? Can I ask you to look at the options A, B, C, D, and E, and let's see why these activities are important in the classroom. Just give you a moment or two to study them. So, editing their work. Why might we want students to edit their work rather than just taking their work home? Okay, we've got a suggestion first of all for number 3. Number 3, play winnerless games. Why do we want to play winnerless games? Jana suggests to focus on tasks as part of a process. Okay, people are beginning to suggest. 3D. A lot of people are writing about 3D. Yes, let's go with that one. That's absolutely true. Why do we not want to have winners? Well, it's not only because we don't want to have the rest of the class crying, but it's because in life we don't always get a reward for everything that we do. And sometimes just learning is fun. Just coming to class can be really good fun. Editing their work. Yeah. It is going to be E. We want them to understand that the task that they did today is not something that they just take home and give to their parents or throw in the bin as they're walking out the door, as sometimes our teenagers do. But that is something that will help them for the next task, something that should be studied, and that there's never an end, that there's always something better that they can do. There's always something more that they can add in. Why might they want to record the teacher's feedback? Yeah, people are suggesting B. That's exactly right. It's important that students don't feel, if they don't know the answer to something, that that the answer has to come from their own head. That's when students feel stupid. I don't know the answer. That's okay. You don't know the answer, but you can use the teacher's feedback. You can use feedback from another student in the lesson if you do peer feedback and that sort of thing. There are other resources out there to help you when you don't know the answer. We talked about negative language there. Why do we prohibit negative language? Well, because words shape our thinking. If we keep saying to ourselves, this is so difficult, I can't do it, we begin to believe it. So we don't want our students to be talking like that. And then gamification, some of you maybe do this. This is the idea that you don't only give students a grade for what they're doing, but you also give them marks for the effort. And of course, the reward you give for effort can come in different ways. Some people give, stickers or stars. Some people give points, give percentages. But basically, it means that a student who maybe isn't academically very good and didn't get a really great result in terms of a grade, they can get maximum marks for effort. And that keeps the students motivated who are maybe not so good at English and are not doing too well in your course, but still they're going to keep on wanting to come to class, wanting to learn, because they're getting marks for their effort. Okay, thank you for your answers with that. So those are the different things that we can do in the classroom. But unfortunately, so often our good work is undermined by the parents, because we only see our students for a little bit of the week and then they go home. And yeah, we need to get the parents involved. We need to explain to the parents what we are doing as well. So if you are a parent, hopefully some of these things will help you to encourage your children. And if you are a teacher, these are some things that you could talk to your parents about in your teacher-parent meeting. If you work in a private school, I'm sure that you see your parents maybe at the beginning of the academic year. You could have an official meeting with them. If you work in a state school, I'm sure that you must have meetings once a semester maybe. I don't know exactly how it works in your system. And you can talk to the parents about the growth mindset and how important it is for them not only to ask their children all the time, so what grade did you get today? What grade did you get today? But working on the continuous learning. Schools in the United Kingdom and in the USA are doing this more and more. When I was preparing for this webinar, I did some research into state schools, and lots of them have information out there on their websites for the parents. So it's very important to get the parents involved. Let's have a look at some of the things that parents can do. So firstly, talk to your children directly about the brain. Explain to them that it's a muscle. What you can see here on the slide is Carol Dweck's basic quiz for children on what children think about their brain. This is something that you can download for free from the internet, and you could do with your children, and that might be a starting point for a discussion about what they think about themselves, what they think about their own intelligence, and whether they think they can make progress. And so it kind of provokes an interesting discussion with them there. Our working memory can only hold about 7 pieces of information at one time, so experts say. And it's important to share that with your children. Tell them that you don't expect them to remember absolutely everything that you ever tell them, but that they physically can't do that. And so if they can't remember all those things, what are they going to do? Encourage the children to make lists, write shopping lists, write on calendars. These are simple things, but they're just reminding children that we must have strategies to remember. And it's the same in real life. It's the same in the classroom. Writing things down, keeping a logical record of things is a natural part of our life. Tip 2, of course, watch your words. Make sure that you're praising the work that they're doing and not how clever they are. So we don't want to be saying to children, you're so smart, you're so intelligent, I'm so proud of you because you're great. We want to be saying, I've noticed how hard you worked on that piece of homework, or you've been working really hard on this project. I'm proud of you for your effort. Focus on the effort. Lots of parents have reward systems for their children at home. Try to create a reward system based on the effort, not based on the result. And when you're asking your children to help you at home, they're maybe helping you with chores. Don't wait for them to finish the chore and then say, well done, or, oh, you didn't do that well enough. check in with your children throughout or in the middle of the job. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them if they need help. Ask them if they need more strategies. How could they do this differently? How could they do this more efficiently? So again, not just focusing on the task as an end product, but it's a step, and that there are strategies and that there are people there to help them along the way. Tip 3, of course, if you want your children to develop a growth mindset, you need to have a growth mindset. You need to be a role model. You need to be careful about how you talk about yourself. You don't want to say things like, I'm bad at cooking or something like that. Instead, ask your child to say, how can I become better at cooking? And then together, you could go and learn something together. You could cook, investigate a recipe together, choose a recipe, go out and do something together. And you can show your child that if you feel you are not as good at something as you would like to be, you can go out and change that situation. Children learn most of all probably by copying the adults and the people around them. So this is an extremely important thing, and it's something that you can do together. You also need to understand, of course, their emotions, and that if a child has very negative emotions towards something, they're just not going to be learning. So sometimes, of course, children do just have a bad day, and if your child has an extremely negative attitude that particular day, probably it's better not to push them because they will remember just the negative feeling here. Maybe it's better just to move on, do something different, and come back to this particular task on a day when he's in a happier mood, because the mood is extremely important. If they're not in the right mindset, they're not going to make progress. And yeah, we all see this unhappy face from time to time. Tip 5, discourage envy. When you hear your children saying things like, oh, I don't like, Sveta because she always gets top marks, or I don't like Maxime because he's the best in the class. This is a very negative attitude that we don't want our students and our children to develop. So we want our children to understand that everyone is on a separate path. Everyone has their own path through life, and everyone is at their own particular stage along that path. So instead, we want people to be happy for others, to congratulate other people, instead of comparing themselves with somebody else. There's always somebody who's going to be better than you, and that's not helpful. And we can try to identify people who seem to be having a difficult time. You can ask your children to write to other members in the family. Leave a little poster for a brother or sister, or send an email to an uncle or something like this who seems to be having a bad time, just to remind them that things will get better. And by reminding other people, the children will be reminded themselves that we don't compare ourselves to other people. We are all unique, and we all have our own path to go along. Number 6 is the one that we all know, of course, accepting mistakes as an opportunity to learn. If life doesn't seem difficult, if we are not making mistakes, then we are not learning. You've probably seen the language learning scale where it goes up like this. When it goes up, it goes up, then it reaches a plateau, then you go up again, then you reach a plateau and up again. And basically, you can draw this out with your children and show them that when are they learning, that when they're at that plateau, they're not learning at all. Life seems easy, but they've stopped learning. It's only when they're going uphill that the learning takes place, and that this is normal. This is the same as everybody else, and not just in learning English, but in all parts of our lives. If we don't make mistakes, we aren't learning. And for those of you who live in Moscow, a little bit of advertising for Lenta. I managed to find erasers or rubbers that say "I love mistakes," and I gave them out to my students. So I see that somebody says there's technical problems, but I hope that's not with everybody. Can most people still hear me? Please put a plus or some. Okay, good. That's just good. Not everybody. Excellent. You're still with me. Next tip. Tip number 7, ignore the easy route. If you don't understand my picture here, it's an ostrich, this famous bird, putting his head in the sand because he doesn't want to have any difficulties. You can create a family motto or a family philosophy that in this family, we are not afraid of making mistakes. We are not afraid of taking risks. And together you can make a policy of going out and learning new things together, trying to do something that you've never done before, because it's not the easy route. As we said already, if it's easy, we aren't learning anything, and we're going to have a very boring life. Are people saying that the video is not working? Is everybody still okay? Seems to be different people. Okay, so basically, try things together with your family. Go out at the weekend and do something completely new instead of doing the things that you always do. There's also some wording that you can try with your children. It's called mental contrasting, and it's the idea is that you say, if I do this, then I will do this. So it's connected to the idea of breaking your goals into manageable steps, and showing children that before you can get a result, you do have to do something difficult. You do have to take a step forward, take a risk or something like that, and then you will be able to reach your goal. And the final tip is just to remind you that the growth mindset isn't only about school, of course. It's about sport. It's about our relationships with other people, our friendships, and so it's not just about saying, oh, I can't do English or something like that. It's it affects every part of our life. And we, if you remembering one of the first slides that I had there, we had fixed mindset, growth mindset, and there's a mixed mindset. So probably most of us have a mixed mindset, because in some aspects of life we're going to have more of a growth mindset, and in some aspects of life we're probably going to be more fixed. So anyway, all aspects of life, wherever you are with your children, sitting at the dinner table, going for a walk in the park, out in the supermarket, whatever you're talking about and whatever you're doing, there's always room to be developing this mindset with them. So let's see. Of course, though, sometimes in life children do fail. Sometimes things don't go according to plan, and that's very important too. Our reaction there. Make sure that the children don't see failure as something terrible. Don't ever criticize your children for not getting the result that they wanted. Only if they didn't try hard enough to get that result. That's the only thing that can be criticized. So let's very quickly see what you think, or what you have got out of all of this. So again, I need you to be getting active in your chat box, because I've got some situations here, and I would like you to read them and type into the chat box A, B, or C. So let's see what you think. First of all, if you have a growth mindset, it means you, A, believe you can change the outcome of your life, B, are afraid of failure, C, believe you're better than everyone else. Type into the chat box A, B, or C. Yeah, nice, easy question to begin with there. Absolutely, of course it's A. You believe you can change your life, and not just believe it, we can. Next question. Constantly praising children by saying, "You're amazing, you're so intelligent," leads to what? A, your child believing in himself. B, your child feeling confident. Or C, your child needing praise for every task. And I can already see there's complete agreement here, CCC. Your child needs praise all the time. If you keep on praising them, they're going to keep on asking for praise. And of course, in life, we don't always get praise. This is a negative characteristic. We don't want to have this. If you tell your child, "You're brilliant, you got an A without studying," what does a child think? They think, school is cool, I'm fantastic, I should stop studying or my parents won't think I'm brilliant. Somebody said option F. I'm not sure what option that F is. Yeah, I agree if you say B. Yeah, okay, the child does think that they're fantastic, but more importantly, they are more likely to give up because they've already got their A. The parents think they're wonderful, and so they will be afraid to try anything new. They will be afraid to do any more work in case they don't get that A, and the parents don't think they're so wonderful anymore. So this is very dangerous. Again, don't focus on the lack of effort. Always push your children to try. They can always do better. If a child has a growth mindset, what are they going to be? Are they going to be more independent, responsive, better behaved, happy and intelligent, successful, clever, confident? Interesting debate going on here between the A's and the C's. Actually, the answer here is A. Having a growth mindset, of course, doesn't make a child more clever. That just isn't going to happen. But it does make them independent, so that when they don't know the answer to something, they are going to be able to go and find the answer to something. They're going to be responsive to parents and teachers, the adults in their lives, and they're going to be listening to the feedback and learning from it, taking things on board. And ultimately, they're going to be better behaved in the classroom and in their relationship, perhaps with brothers and sisters, because they're not going to be comparing themselves with other people. And they're not going to have this fear of failure all the time. So the answer here would be A, and this is really proof why a growth mindset is such an important thing, I think. Which of these pieces of feedback are not helpful? You can use this mistake. Think about why it didn't work and learn from it. Or, "You're top of the class this time." Or, "You need some more challenging work." Now, in this case, which of these pieces of feedback are not helpful? B, A, B, B, B. Yes, the trick here, of course, is which feedback is not helpful. Of course, you're top of the class. Why are you telling a student that? Who cares where they are in relation to other students? That's not important. What's important is where that child is in their own stage of development. Your child has a growth mindset and they didn't try at all, but they got an A. What are they going to be thinking? Well, hey, I'm so clever. Are they going to be thinking, what did everyone else get? Are they going to be thinking, what's the point in going to school? Now, this is a child with a growth mindset. So one of these positive children that we're hoping to bring up, what are they going to be thinking? I can see quite a few C's coming out here. Maybe some A's. This is a growth mindset child now. So they're not interested in what everyone else got because they're only interested in their own path towards learning. They're not interested in intelligence. They're not going to be thinking, I'm clever. They are going to become demotivated. They're not going to see the point in going to school anymore because if they get an A anyway, without even trying, then what is the point? Remember, the growth mindset children are not interested in the result. They are interested in the learning and what they're actually getting from school. So be careful. A child who has the right attitude, if we are not supporting them in the correct way, they are going to lose interest in school. What about this? Your child says, I don't like so-and-so because they always get top grades. Have they got a fixed mindset, a growth mindset, or it's impossible to say? Yeah. Yeah, quite a lot of A's there. Absolutely. They have a fixed mindset. Again, they're comparing themselves to other people instead of looking at themselves and looking at how they can improve themselves to reach their own personal goal. Again, thinking about a growth mindset child. They tried very hard, but they failed a test. What's their reaction? Are they going to think, oh, well, never mind? They're going to think it was a stupid test anyway. Or they're going to say, I see from the teacher's notes why I got these questions wrong. Next time I'll remember that. Well, of course, yeah, as most of you are noticing here, they're going to be paying attention to the teacher's notes, and they're going to be looking for a way to use this failure to improve the next time. Because again, they're thinking about the progression. They're going to use this work as a basis for the next thing. So well done. You seem to know all the right answers here. So if you find this useful, don't forget that there's a folder of useful materials that you can get. You can find the 2 lesson plans that I talked about, posters for your classroom, some cards that you can cut up and match and so on. So don't forget about that you can get hold of that at the end of the webinar. But for now, you have been asking me questions. So let's take a look and let's just check that you still have, I can still see. So some of the questions that we've got. Now there is a very interesting question. Nadezhda Malokova, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly there. Nadezhda Malokova asks, if you answer a student, I don't know the answer, don't you damage your reputation? Now, this is a very, very interesting question, actually, because as a native speaker, sometimes students think that native speakers must always know the answer, but of course I don't. I don't know every word in the English language. I don't think it damages your reputation at all. I think it's dangerous if that's the only thing you say. If you just say, I don't know the answer, okay, let's move on. But if you say, okay, I don't know the answer, let's take out our phones, let's look at Google, let's look at Wikipedia, let's find out the answer together. You're showing the students that there's always a way to, there's always an answer. There's always a way out, and that nobody can know everything. So no, I don't think it damages your reputation at all. I think that's a good question, but no, don't worry about it. Just together find out the answer. Karina Shilina asks, how can a teacher always stay self-confident, especially at the beginning of one's career? This is also a very good question. Karina, I don't know how you can stay self-confident. You just need to act self-confident. So you just need to keep smiling, and try not to go red when things go wrong. Yeah, at the beginning of your career. Again, it's connected to the previous question. Don't be afraid to say that, well, I don't know. I don't know if this helps, but when I first became a teacher, of course, as I say, I'm a native speaker. I didn't know my grammar maybe as well as some of you Russians know it. If a student asked me, but Sarah, future in the past, how is that different from, I would just say to them, that's a good question, but it's not the topic of today's lesson. We'll deal with it next week. And then I could go home or go to the teacher's room and read up on that topic. So that's something I think that new teachers can do. You just make a note of what the student wants to know and say, not today, and then students feel that you have listened to their question, but you're going to come back to it later on when you're capable of answering that question. Anna Zarukina asks what to do if a student is too confident about his skills, but he isn't as good as he thinks. If he's too confident, of course, that's probably a sign that he's got a fixed mindset, and we need to do some. This would exactly be the type of student that we want to work with to develop his understanding of the growth mindset. If he's too confident, probably you're talking about an adult here, I would think, in which case recording his own voice and trying to understand that, analyze it himself might help him to appreciate that he's not that great. But yeah, this would be your best student, Anna. This would be the best one to do some work with on the growth mindset, I would say. And the final question that looks really interesting here, Olga Kisilyova asks, does the mindset change with age? Yes, definitely, but not only with age. The mindset changes with everything that we encounter in our life, the people that we meet, the experiences that we have, the things that we read, and the teachers and people in authority in our lives. So definitely changes with age, but probably not naturally, only with the experiences that we have along the way. So thank you very much to everybody who asked questions. Thank you to all of you for your active chat boxing. I hope that there's been something useful that you can take away from this, and I wish you happy, motivated students in your classroom and in your homes. So thank you very much to everybody for listening this evening. Good night.